right, everybody. I just got back from the gym, which means a Q&A and crazy hair, apparently. Let's get to it. Is it possible to add 20 kilos or about 45 pounds to your pronated lat pull down and have your arms stay the same size? It's definitely possible, especially if you're not like a complete beginner. When you're a complete beginner, yes, you can get bicep gains from doing things like chin-ups and rows. However, the more advanced you get, the less that's going to work. I have personally put 20 kilos on my pull down before without my arms gaining much size. And that's while I was also training arms directly. Now, I'm not a beginner. If you are a beginner, that's a lot more improbable. But yeah, there's still this whole strength culture on the internet where people are like telling beginners that they don't need to do curls, they don't need to do laterals, they don't need to do tricep extensions because compounds are enough for everything. Newsflash, buddy, no, they're not. If you want to look like you have small arms, don't train your arms. It works every time. Can high specificity powerlifting work year round? Well, it depends what you mean by work. Like, can you add a little bit to your total every year doing that? Absolutely. Now, will it work well for you? No. And the reason why I specifically say that it won't work well for you is because of the questions that you constantly ask. Can I get stronger without getting bigger? Do I have to do variations? Can I do high specificity powerlifting training year round? It sounds like you're literally trying to avoid gaining muscle. Like you're doing everything that you can to not put on muscle and to not have to do anything besides squat, bench, deadlift in the competition form. And you'll never be any good unless you're already super advanced using that style. Have you ever thought about narrating other people's training sessions like Morgan Freeman? What? No, I have never thought about that. Honestly, man, like I don't really want to go like full social media content creator guy. Like I would like to focus on being a bodybuilder. And if people are interested in what I have to say as a bodybuilder, I'm fine with that. But I already tried like the social media, be a quote unquote guru thing with powerlifting to win. And I hated it. Like I, in my mind, I'm a lifter first and foremost, not like a information dispenser, not a coach. I do coach, but I'm first and foremost a lifter myself. And I want to keep it that way this time. How long do you usually wait between blasts? Between business doses of PEDs, it doesn't really matter what I do. It matters what you're going to do and how to decide that risk profile on your own. So at a bare minimum, you should have blood work showing that your values have returned to normal. And depending on the length of your cycle, which most people are going to run cycles that last 16 to 24 weeks, somewhere in that range, it's probably going to take you anywhere from 6 to 16 weeks to get those values back to normal. So this is all going to depend on your own individual genetics and your own risk tolerance, but you should have blood work showing that you've returned to baseline values, in my opinion. What are the pros and cons of fast versus slow dieting? So I think the whole frame of this question is wrong. Dieting needlessly slow has absolutely no benefits, and dieting too fast is going to cost you muscle mass and performance in the gym. So what you have to balance is you don't want to go needlessly slow and waste time that you could have been in a surplus, but you shouldn't be going so fast that you're constantly thinking about food, have tons of diet fatigue, and worst of all, losing performance in the gym. Keep in mind that the faster that you do go, the more likely that you're going to rebound at the end. As far as what the actual rate of weight loss should be, that's going to be primarily determined by two things. One is your skill as a dieter. The more experience you have and the more skill you have as a dieter, the more you're going to be able to sustain larger, faster deficits without basically either breaking your diet while you're on it or binging as soon as you end the diet. And the less skill you have, the more likely that you are going to set yourself up for a binge and rebound phase if you try to diet too fast. The other thing is whether or not you're on PEDs. In my experience, when you're on PEDs, even on quote unquote TRT plus, sports TRT, you are still going to be able to diet faster than a natural without performance loss. So all in all, it's probably the range is probably somewhere between 0.5% to 1.5% of body weight per week. How do you make the most out of high bar squats? I have limited equipment at my gym. So guys, keep in mind, unless you're like an IFBB pro with defined weaknesses and just super high development, you don't need special equipment or perfect equipment. You don't need a hack squat. You don't need a pendulum squat. You can get huge quads from squats. The number one thing I would recommend is to make sure that you have adequate heel elevation. Unless you have short femurs and great ankle mobility, most people actually need a 20 to 30 degree squat wedge and not just Olympic lifting shoes. Second, you have to cue hips forward. As soon as your hips start shooting back on tough reps, you are recruiting glutes and adductors and taking tension off your quads. Hips forward, every rep. I can do significantly more weight when doing hammer curls when I alternate arms. Does this mean that it is more stimulus and maybe more fatigue? Well, man, think about it. Like if you're doing any exercise and you were to rest like 3 to 5 seconds between every single rep, you're basically doing a set of cluster singles at that point, right? So it's going to be much harder to get metabolite accumulation. And yes, it's going to be more stimulus, but it's probably going to be proportionally more fatigue. So I think that when you're alternating arms, it's probably making the stimulus to fatigue ratio worse than simply doing both arms at the same time. And if you really want to do it unilaterally, I would recommend doing one arm at a time. Because again, like think about this on any other exercise. Even after reps that weren't hard, if you just started taking 3 to 5 big breaths, you're going to be able to do way more, but it's not necessarily going to improve the stimulus to fatigue ratio from a hypertrophy perspective. Any tips or tricks to hit failure? I'm having trouble hitting 0 on squats. So I can answer this in a bunch of different ways, but I'll be helpful. Why do you need to hit failure on squats? Especially if we're talking about something like a barbell squat. Usually by the time you hit true failure or 0 RIR, your technique has broken down anyway. Are you progressing? Because that's all that really matters. And progression is the best way to get you to hit true 0 on a squat. Just keep adding weight, okay? A little bit every time. And eventually, in order to beat what you did last time, you're going to have to hit 0. And the reason for that is because you can't progress infinitely, right? So if you just keep adding 5 pounds every week, eventually, in order to maintain your reps from last week, you're gonna have to hit that 0 RIR set. If you'd rather fail to progress than fail, that's on you. Why does someone with as much knowledge and experience as you need a coach? So first of all, I feel like roasting you into oblivion for even asking this question, but I'm actually gonna answer it. Out of all the top 15 competitors on the Mr. Olympia stage, every single one of them has a coach. At a certain point, it's no longer about why do I need to do this or need to do that? The people at the top have been doing everything they need to do for years. At a certain point, it becomes about asking yourself, what more can I do to get slightly better results? And you start doing little things to optimize that you don't need to do because you want to get better results. Second, this isn't even true, man. I've never even done one bodybuilding contest yet. I've never peaked. I've never had to know when to put the tan on at the right time. I've never put together a posing routine. So I don't really know what experience you're talking about, but you can always be better with a coach. I think maybe people got the wrong impression the other day when I answered that question that said like, who would you like to learn from? I was specifically talking about like in a non-personal context. Like I don't go around really watching YouTube videos or hunting down information anymore. But if we're talking about working with certain people in a one-on-one capacity where they can look at my lifting mechanics and say, maybe you should try this, or they say you should try this movement based on your body type. They say you should try this technique adjustment, or where we learn about how my body responds to certain PEDs or to nutrition in a one-on-one context, the list of people that I'd like to learn from in that format is like a mile long. I was specifically talking about like consuming generalized online bodybuilding content. Again, man, no matter how much you know, there's almost always someone that knows more. And if they're on your team, you can get significantly better results. How can I resistance train my abs at home? I find it funny that people think I'm the guy to ask for like at-home equipment suggestions. I would like never train at home. Anyway, it depends on what you have access to, right? The things that I've done when I was like a teenager, I did weighted sit-ups with a dumbbell behind my head, and I would like hook my feet under a bookshelf or like a dresser or something like that. If you have a bar that you can hang from somewhere, or like a sturdy tree branch, I don't know, you can do hanging leg raises with something between your legs. But I mean, if you're going to the gym on other days, why don't you just throw in some ab work at the end of your other sessions? That's what all responsible adults do. What PEDs will you use to help you recover from your bicep injury? Sorry, I know you hate PED questions. I do not hate PED questions. I hate when you ask me PED questions because you're 19 or 20 or whatever you are, and you haven't even been training seriously for 5 years yet with consistent nutrition, sleep, etc. You're not a candidate yet. That's why. However, most PEDs don't really help with injuries, okay? Now, there are drugs that you can take, peptides that help, and that would be BCP157, TB500, and of course, human growth hormone, and I will be using all three of those to try and recover faster from the surgery. Is Nikola Jokic maybe the greatest offensive player ever? No, come on, man. This is total prisoner of the moment stuff right here. This is like the definition of being a prisoner of the moment. You can't be considered for the greatest offensive player ever until you do it against playoff defenses multiple times, especially at the highest levels in the finals. The way he is playing right now is statistically incredible, and there's only a handful of guys in history that can match this current playoff run's offensive production. Like, once you account for everything, right? Like prime Shaq, prime Steph Curry, prime LeBron James, prime Michael Jordan, maybe prime Wilt Chamberlain. It's hard to say because we don't have all the statistics that we need to accurately judge Wilt. But I probably wouldn't put him in there. But so it's really those five guys like Jokic, Shaq, Curry, Jordan, LeBron. And the playoff run that he's having right now has earned him a spot amongst those guys for a single run. But to be the greatest ever, we need more than one, and we need it in the finals. Can you make up for an inferior strength curve by simply doing more volume? So first of all, man, I'm sorry about how JP roasted you for asking this question. Second of all, we do need to place this into context. Worrying about strength curves is something that most of you don't need to do, okay? You can get huge and jacked doing your basic barbell work, even if that's all you have. However, no, you cannot. And think of it like this. If somebody came to you and said, can I make up for having horrible technique by just doing more sets than somebody that has good technique? Well, yes, you can make up for the stimulus, but you're still getting a worse stimulus to fatigue ratio. So what that means is that if the other person does as many sets as you, they're going to get either the same stimulus or more stimulus with less fatigue. Meaning that if we keep pushing this example, they can do more sets than you and still recover. And so you can't ever make up for an inferior piece of equipment or inferior technique, because something that has a better SFR will always be an advantage in the long run. I have access to a pendulum squat for the first time. Any tips to get the most out of the machine? So the great thing about pendulum squats and hack squats is that they're mostly idiot proof. And the whole point is that you can just get on there and go as hard as you want without having to worry about the super technical side of like a barbell squat. However, that said, there's definitely some things you can do to maximize the quad stimulus. Put your feet as low on the platform as you can without your heels coming up and without getting knee pain. And turn your feet a little more forward than other squats. Can you make the hammer strength row drop off more in the short by adding additional chest pads? Yes, you can. It would totally work. However, the easiest way to change the strength curve of any hammer row machine is to simply do it one arm at a time, step back, and then use your off arm on the chest pad. And that's going to make pretty much every single hammer row machine, whether it's the low row or the Dorian row or the hammer unilateral row that I'm showing here, it makes every single one of them more length and bias. So that's what I would suggest instead. Do you do anything for abs besides that crunch machine? Not currently, no. I mean, think about it, guys. How does hypertrophy work the best? It works the best when you have a concentric and eccentric stretch shortening cycle, right? And what is the concentric and eccentric stretch shortening cycle of the abs? It's spinal flexion. So a crunch motion. Now, you could, of course, argue that you could get some more lower abs by including something like a hanging leg raise variation. And at some point, I will probably rotate that in when I need to rotate ab exercises. But for now, I'm going to get the most bang for my buck by just smashing the out of a crunch machine and getting as strong as possible on that crunch machine. Also, keep in mind that as an enhanced bodybuilder, I'm very prone to growth everywhere, systemic growth even. So I really try to avoid most free weight ab exercises just out of the potential that it hypertrophies my obliques because I have to do some sort of side-to-side stabilization. So crunch machines is where I spend most of my time. All right, motherfuckers, that is the end of the video. So, you know what to do. Like the video if you like the video. Questions and comments in the comment section, which I get to as soon as I can. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a wonderful weekend. It's Friday.